What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Random Redshirt Podcast. I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host is Chris. What's up, Chris?
Hello, Zach. Hello, everyone. Zach, always great to be here again. Just great to see you. And it's going to be another awesome episode where we get to talk about an incredible new season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds that has come out. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we've been waiting for this since season one ended, right? I mean, it's been a
Yeah.
while, and it's been a couple weeks since we've been able to get together and record. I know you've been doing some work travel and stuff, so welcome back.
Thank
And
you.
it's great to be back on here, man. I'll tell you what. At the time of this recording, we have an absolutely jam-packed weekend of recordings that we'll get to later. But yeah, this is awesome. Like I know we both love Strange New Worlds. If you haven't had a chance to watch our Strange New World season one review, you can go back and listen. I don't think we did video for that, so you can listen to that anywhere you get your podcasts. When we did our Strange New World review, though, we did it for the pilot episode, for the first episode of season one, and then we reviewed the whole season as a whole. We're going to go back now and do episode by episode like we did for Picard. A lot of people really liked our Picard review, Chris. We get a lot of really positive feedback, and they said, hey, when are you going to do more? We did the spotlight review of Mirror Mirror from TOS, and now we're jumping into Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and then we'll do Ahsoka. Like, we got a lot of stuff for reviews
Yeah.
coming up. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. It is these one-on-one episodes gives us a chance to, get a little bit more detailed and then go on tangents and then talk about, a lot of other things that the particular episode may remind us of or inspire us to talk about. So, these are kind of nice, and then we don't feel, we only have so much memory, so we can only we can only remember so much at a time.
Well, we mentioned it, right? Could
Yeah.
you imagine had we done Star Trek Picard season three the way we did season one and two, where we just talked about the season as a whole? There would have been so much we missed out on, or we left out on, or forgot about, or whatever. I'm glad we did it that way, and I think the response that those of you who are listen to us or watch us, have given. And so it's like, yeah, we should jump into this. And I love doing these deep dives. These deep dives are awesome. You really get a chance to dive into the dialogue and the story and the plot and the character developments and the arcs. And it just makes it that much more fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is going to be great. Is there anything, Chris, that you've been, reading or watching or anything that you wanted to share real quick before we jump into episode one of season two of Strange New Worlds?
Yeah, thank you, Zach. So as you know, I have been reading The Expanse. I am on book 4 of The Expanse now, and I am enjoying it. And I kept telling you that, hey, I'm going to start watching The Expanse. I'm going to start watching The Expanse. So I finally
Yeah.
started watching it, season 1 this week. So I know I've got a long way to go. And I know there's a lot of episodes and a lot of seasons of The Expanse, but just letting you know, I'm enjoying it so far. Very different, and I'm really enjoying the book. So it's nice to reflect on what I've read and what I get to see, um, that's been created for the television show, and what the creators of the show, how they envisioned it compared to how I envisioned it too. And so I'm enjoying
Yeah,
it so far. Yeah.
I've watched season one of The Expanse. So I think at some point down the road we'll get to talking about The Expanse as a whole, as a show. It's a sci-fi show. If you don't know much about it,
Yeah.
it takes place in the future in the solar system. Lots of different people from different areas in the solar system living, and all the fighting and the trading. And it's I think. I don't know how you feel so far from reading the books and watching some of the first season, but I feel like it's probably maybe the most realistic version of what the future could hold, right? As humanity hopefully one day, expands out into the solar system, to back to the moon, to Mars and beyond. But it's a pretty good show. It's not a utopia like Star Trek. It is a
Yeah.
dystopia, very much a dystopia. So it's fun. We look forward to talking about that at some point down the road. I've got book one right here
Oh,
on
nice.
my shelf. Yeah, I've read about 10 pages of that book. Just tell you, I've got several books here I've not finished in this stack, except for Way of the Cobra, which is Sean's book. I've already read that.
Which was an awesome book, right? I liked Way the Cobra. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, really
Yeah.
great book if you hadn't had a chance to read that. Yeah. So okay, well let's jump into Star Trek
Yeah.
Strange New World season two. This is something for those of you who have listened to our podcast know we're big fans of Strange New Worlds. The first season, it was really, really good. There were just a very small amount of, I think, nitpicks or gripes about the first season as a whole. But in general, we had a lot of positive things to say about it. If you remember, Chris, I think one of the things that kind of made me feel this way about Strange New Worlds is that I kind of felt like at the time, because it was before we got Picard season 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of felt like Strange New Worlds was the the new or the modern Trek show that we needed. Obviously, Picard season 3 has maybe changed that a little bit because we got, I think, what we didn't realize we needed.
Yeah, yeah,
Picard season 3.
yeah, I agree completely. And I was thinking about Stranger Worlds today. One of the things that I appreciated about it is, it's taking characters that are in canon of Star Trek with Pike and Spock and Uhura and several others, but it's not burdened by those characters. I think it's having some really fresh and original takes on those characters to explore who they are. And that's not an easy thing to do, but I think they're
No.
doing a really nice job with that, and it's very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and I think too, and this goes back to what Doug told us on our podcast. You have to realize that a lot of stuff that's happening in modern Trek may not exactly line up with the what they call legacy Star Trek, or what I call 90s Trek, at least most of it. So if you take it as like, this is a little branch, right, on the olive tree here for Star Trek. And so things in modern Trek there's going to be some differences, right? Like there has been stuff that's taken place in Strange New World season 1 that was contrary to things that may have happened in the quote unquote canon or the legacy Trek shows. If you realize that not everything's probably going to line up and you get past that, I think it's better. But there was a lot of great things that came out of Strange New World season 1. I think, we kind of talk about this really quickly before we jump into season 2 here, episode number 1. One of the things I really enjoyed about Strange New World season 1 was that we got a great mix, like you said, Chris, of some characters we're familiar with, right? With Spock, Uhura, Pike, even number 1, right?
Yeah.
Una. Although she wasn't nearly as developed as she is in Strange New Worlds, because we only got her in The Cage, that very first pilot episode from 1966, before William Shatner joined the show. And so, or was she on Shatner's, or was she in Shatner's first episode of Star Trek?
I don't
remember.
So.
I don't think so either. No, because I think Majel Barrett got basically recast into Nurse Chapel.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's how it went. So if I got that wrong, you guys feel free to berate me with, you're not a real Trekkie. Okay. But Strange New Worlds for me was a great blend of old and new. Right. I think that we got some familiarity, which we've talked about before, right? But when you bring in familiarity into a new series and then bring in new stuff, I think that helps kind of bridge the gap a little bit.
I do. I agree with you there too. And it's welcoming for brand new viewers. I see it as this is very enjoyable for someone that doesn't know anything about Star Trek or comes into Strange New Worlds as the very first Star Trek series that they see. I think it's great for that, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a show where there's going to be certain things that maybe you don't catch if you've never seen Star Trek before, if it's your first exposure to it. There's going to be callbacks and hints where you're like, oh, I didn't realize this was tied to this or whatever. But in general, you could, because this show is back to the episodic idea, right? Like the original series in Next Gen were, that you could watch it with a fresh set of eyes and probably still be okay, right? Yeah. You're not going to be just completely in the dark. There's things you're going to miss, or you're not going to catch or not understand why things are certain ways. But in general, I think you could watch season 1 of Strange New World as your first Trek experience and be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So if you have never watched Star Trek before, Strange New Worlds is not a bad way to jump into the franchise. So, all right, let's get into this. Season 2 of Strange New Worlds, episode number 1, The Broken Circle is the name of this episode. I wrote that down, Chris, so I wouldn't forget, like I did with Picard half the time in season 3, of what the name of the episode was.
I had already forgotten what the name of the episode, so I'm glad you wrote it down.
Good thing I wrote it down. Yeah. So, you look at this episode, And we already know we're getting to season 3. We know that Strange New Worlds was renewed for season 3, so that's great. But you look at this particular episode, and the series picks up basically a few months or so after, I believe, the season finale, which I think was called Equality of Mercy. Remember where at the end of it, the first officer, Una, is arrested and waiting trial for concealing that she was an Illyrian,
Yes.
which they genetically modify themselves. And that's a big, big no-no in the Federation. And of course, we know the primary reason for that is why.
Oh, the primary reason that they
That the Federation doesn't allow genetic manipulations because of the
yeah,
eugenics
the
wars and
eugenics
con.
wars, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
by the way, there is, I don't remember if it's a series of books or just one book, but there is a book or books out there, Star Trek novels, that are all about the eugenics wars. So if you look those up, I can't remember the title of them. They might be called Eugenic Wars. I can't remember, but I think the first book has an image of Khan on it.
Yeah.
You know, a younger Khan from TOS. Um, and I've heard they're pretty good. I have not read them though. But if you want to get more like detailed outside of the series in the expanded universe of Star Trek books, there'd be good books to read.
Maybe that's a good idea for like a spin-off show. That'd be completely different.
Yeah,
Spin-off,
because it
yeah,
would be like pre-Trek, um, tech,
right.
right? It'd be not the 1990s. That's kind of when the whole thing started, right? What our past, what's now our past, was Star Trek's future in the 60s.
Yeah. No Starfleet,
So,
just a bunch of augmented humans that causing havoc.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
all led by Khan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we know that Una's arrested and she's taken off, and that's kind of where we sort of end with Equality of Mercy. And we're picking up at Starbase One, which I thought, I don't know how you felt about this, Chris, but I thought the camera pan all the way around the Enterprise and the music behind it and those absolutely gorgeous views of Jupiter, which we just saw some amazing views of Jupiter in Picard season 3 in the finale, right? With
Yeah.
that Borg cube. Um, Visually, the Starbase One and the view of the Enterprise and Jupiter and everything, it was visually stunning. What did you think of that kind of opening moment as you're seeing Starbase One?
I thought it was a beautiful shot and it was nice. It was nice seeing Jupiter, and you saw some of those domes, kind of those ter not terraforming domes, but kind of green domes that were
Yeah.
near the starbase, and a very nice look at the Enterprise. One of the things that stood out to me when I was watching it was it, it was you saw those little ships like flying around like really fast around the shuttle, the normal shuttle that's going to the Enterprise. And for me, this is for me. I found it okay. I found it a little bit distracting. Like, oh, this is distracting me to see all these little ships kind of flying around really fast. And you and I talked about this a little bit earlier. But what came to my mind was it's cool. I could see like a a perspective or some taste, and like you might want to see that and see like a lot of action going around in that shot. But I was almost like, oh, it doesn't need to be so busy. Just enjoy the shot, and then have maybe grounded in a little bit more. I want to say realism. I know we're still. It's not hard science and it's not real, but I was just thinking maybe a little bit more closer to how it would actually look in reality. And and because we had seen Picard season 3 recently, I kept going back into my mind on how the ships looked and how things were portrayed in Picard with the ship's battles and how they looked. And we were spoiled in Picard. Picard was
Oh
so
yeah.
like beautiful, right? And so
Oh yeah.
I kept going, oh, comparing myself to that. So the shot was great, but in a way, I was like, okay, um, just let the shot breathe and let's enjoy. And I don't need to have so much activity going on the screen and so many things moving fast for me. So it was beautiful though, and I'm sure a lot of people loved it.
Yeah, I was trying to just take it all in so much that when they first got to the Enterprise, I had to kind of blink and go, oh, okay, we're at the Enterprise now. Like, it was just there was so much to look at.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful shot, I thought. And I loved how they panned kind of around the back of the Enterprise. They came around it, and then they come all the way around. So then you get the front shot, right, with the deflector dish, and you see the front and then the cells and the soft section and everything like that. And then you see Jupiter in the background, and you're like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, just what a way to start
Mhm.
this episode, right? It really, really was beautiful. So we get onto the Enterprise, and Captain Pike and Spock are having a discussion, right? In his I don't know if it's in his I think it's in his quarters, right?
Yeah, somewhere on there. But
And he
yeah.
yeah, and he's talking about how he's got to go help Una, because he had been talking to Una, asking, like, have you gotten any help? Like, has there been anybody willing to basically take your case? Like, any kind of lawyers or whatever is going to take your case, and doesn't seem like anybody wants to.
Yeah.
Um, and so he's like, you know what? He's got to do his thing, and he's got to come help in some way.
Yeah.
And she knows that's not really a good idea, because she doesn't. My guess is she thinks he's going to throw his whole career away if he comes and helps. Right? He's going to tarnish his reputation or his name, and that's going to affect the rest of his career.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And you know what I liked about that? It was a short exchange with Una and Pike. But Una said something like, "Hey, don't pick a fight that you can't win." And
yeah,
Captain Pike says, "No, we didn't start this fight. We're doing the right thing." He says that actually. He goes, "No, we want to do the right thing." And then she goes, "There's the Boy Scout." And I love, right? I love that, because that's kind of
yeah,
this that's the archetype of who Captain Pike is, and I like that a lot.
yeah,
Yeah. No?
yeah. He really is.
Yeah.
I look at well, yeah. I look at Pike
Yeah.
just in that way, right? Like that, like Boy Scout type. He is always trying to do the right thing, especially when it comes to his crew or his command. And it definitely fits the character for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, but he's not wrong. I mean, think about this in life, right? I've been taught for most of my adult life, some and a little bit when I was a kid, that many times the right thing is usually the unpopular thing, right? That by doing right, it usually means a lot of people are not going to agree with it.
Hmm.
There's going to be some that do, but in general, I have found that doing the right thing is more times than not usually unpopular.
Hmm.
So what Pike is doing, he believes is the right thing, but he also knows it's not the popular thing to do, right? It's not something that, you know, people would advise him, like, yeah, some adult would be like, yeah, Pike, go do it. It's great. No, not going to do that, right? So he leaves the ship in the hands of the next guy in line, which happens to be Lieutenant Spock.
Yes.
But I mean, if you think about it from Pike's perspective, it's like, well, we're in space dock, we're getting inspected, we're getting, kind of some overhaul and some routine maintenance things after all of what happened in the first season. And what could happen, right? They're not going anywhere. It's not like they're going to go anywhere. So little does he know.
Yeah.
But did you notice though, the ship is being inspected by I think it's like Starfleet's like ops support services or something like that, right? They're going around making sure all the systems work and everything's connected and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they aren't exactly the friendliest of people.
No, they just kind of want to go through and do their job and say, "Hey, let me check the systems and get it done." So
Yeah.
yeah, no, not not the friendliest, or maybe socially intelligent.
No, definitely
part,
not.
part of the Starfleet operations there.
No, and then we also, Chris, we get a scene in sick bay between Spock and Dr. Mbenga that I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I I loved that scene. It was interesting that this happened so early in the episode. I thought, because so Spock is coming to realization that, hey, I'm going to be in command of the Enterprise for this short duration of days, and then he's thinking, he's not feeling so great, right? About it. He's got this tension everywhere. And in his consultation with the doctor, he's realizing it's stress. It's human stress.
Well, yeah. Dr. Mbenga is like, yeah, I think you're dealing with stress or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought that was great. And then Spock's trying to figure out, oh, how do I deal with this? And then Bega's like, well, like the rest of us do, because the everyone else on the ship is experiencing stress. So I thought that was nice, a really nice touch, getting to see that side of Spock. Plus, Mbenga's Dr. Mbenga's recommendation on how Spock can deal with that stress, which was super cool. And so we get to see the introduction of the lute. I think that's the name of the instrument, right? The lute and music. So that was
I yeah, the Leary, it's the Vulcan
oh
harp.
yeah.
Vulcan harp, that's what we know it to
Vulcan
be,
harp.
right? The lag, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's the Vulcan harp.
Yeah. So that was really, really neat to see. And I think in that scene, doesn't Nurse Chapel come in as well? And then we get some awkwardness between Nurse Chapel and Spock, if I'm getting my scenes.
So yeah, the Vulcan harp. I mean, it's a pretty nostalgic thing in Star Trek, right? The times that Spock played the Vulcan harp in TOS, that was
Yeah.
pretty important, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it's really cool to see that. It was cool to see the origin of that instrument, because we see in TOS we see Spock playing that instrument, so it was cool to see it here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that was a nice touch, right? A nice little callback to TOS. I mean, obviously this show has callbacks to TOS all over the place, but that was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a nice way to introduce Spock's love of music. Because what is he says at first, he gets the instrument, he says, oh yeah, we appreciate it for its mathematical algorithms, something like that, music. And then Ben goes, no, use it to help with your emotions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but if we remember from last season, right? Spock does have some other issues. That episode, All Those Who Wander from season one, he had a lot of emotions that he used as part of, fighting against the Gorn. So it makes me wonder, not wonder. It's very clear that stress and all that stuff that happened because he's half human has had a impact on him.
Yeah.
Right, on his Vulcan side and his ability to control his emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And we see that later on throughout the episode too.
And I felt to talk about Spock a little bit more. This version of Spock seems like he is, I don't want to use the embrace, maybe too strong of a word, but is accepting of his human part a little more than like in TOS and Leonard Nimoy's version of Spock there in TOS, because in that one I think Spock was very much trying to not accept his human side as much, but here at least that's how I feel now. I feel like this version of Spock in Strange New Worlds is I think a little bit different, but in a positive way. But he's like more accepting his human side. It seems, at least for now.
Yeah, I think that at this point, a younger Spock, he's learning how to he's learning how to deal with his human side. He's kind of growing into the Spock he'll eventually become. Now, remind me, Chris, Spock has not undergone the Kolinar yet, correct?
Correct.
He doesn't undergo the Kolinar until TOS, like, or one of the movies, or does the Kolinar is in the motion picture, right? Doesn't he undergo the Kolinar? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has not undergone the Kolinar yet.
Yeah.
So emotions very much affect him.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right? It makes sense in the situation that we're in, right? Where it's younger Spock, his human side affects him more so than it does as he gets older. He's he's dealing with these. He's working through these. He's growing into the character that he is going to become, which I think is smart the way that they're doing it. They're not just giving us a Spock from the original series and the movies, because that wouldn't make sense. He's a younger guy now, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he hasn't gone through the same things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think seeing this different side of him makes it enjoyable to watch. Spock never actually finished the Kolinahr, right? I don't think he actually went through it all the way,
I don't remember.
if my memory serves me correctly.
No, I don't remember either. I thought he had in the motion picture, but maybe it got cut short. It's been a while since I've watched that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So while we're on the Enterprise, like a series of things like happens, and it's kind of funny that as those operators that are checking the ship out, right, Uhura gets the signal when they're checking the ship, and that signal, becomes like very, very important. So that signal is actually like Uhura deciphers it, and it's actually from uh, Leon, so who has been missing, Leon Noonien Singh, asking for help. So that right, that was pretty cool, and so that spins and starts like a series of events where she's asking for help. She's asking for the Enterprise resources on the planet called Kajitar 4, I believe is the name. And we learn more about
yep.
that planet in a bit. And so for sure, Spock's not expecting this. So, because Spock is in command and now he's getting kind of essentially a distress call from Leon. And now he's got to make a big decision. So what I liked was that conference and that meeting he had. I want to see what you thought about that too. That meeting he had with the senior staff, thinking, okay, Leon's asking for help. This is what the message says, and essentially, what does everyone recommend? What are we going to do? This is my plan, and if you're not going to go along with it, I totally understand. So I wasn't expecting that uh, from from the Spock I know. So that's why it's this refreshing kind of see that this kind of version of Spock. What did you think? What did you think about that?
Yeah, I thought the scene was great. So you could tell that these inspectors are really annoying the crap out of Uhura, right? They want her to shut the system down, right? They're going to do some kind of
Mhm.
reboot or some kind of work. It's not going to take a little bit of time, 20 minutes or whatever it was. And she's like, no. She's like, I like everything's configured the right way. Like, what happens if a message comes in? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like, nothing's going to happen, whatever. And she's like, no, I'm not. Like, this is my station. She owns it, right?
Mhm.
And obviously she made the right choice because of that message coming in from Leon. And so I okay. Chris, is Uhura both the original with Nichelle and the new one with Celia? Is she not the greatest comms officer in Starfleet? She has
Yeah.
to be, right?
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
mean, I love Uhura, both the old and the new one. I think the new one that Celia's playing is just she's done such a good job, right? This real like strong presence, this character who absolutely belongs in her position, and we saw Uhura as a cadet, right? So Celia, the actress, has taken um uh Uhura from a cadet and how she got
Mhm.
mentored by Hemmer, which I thought was a great little mentorship relationship from season one. And she's now grown and become an ensign, and she has owned her position, right? Like she's
Yeah.
this is hers. It's nobody else's, it's hers. And I think it's fantastic. So the scene was great. And I do think that it was that Spock deciding, well, we're going to steal the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Uh, you knew something had to happen because it wasn't just going to leave space dock for no reason because they're under routine inspection and maintenance and everything like that. Something had to happen. But I was actually thinking that maybe somebody else would recommend the idea, maybe to Spock,
Yeah.
not necessarily Spock be the guy that came up with the idea, which I thought was clever,
Yeah.
by the way. Have a little bit of a plot twist there.
Yeah. Me too. I thought it was interesting. I mean, and Spock did try to get proper permission. And he did ask the admiral and say, "Hey, this is going on, and we should, you know, go help." But he's denied. So that was I agree with you. I thought it was a twist to see, oh, Spock's the one coming up with this idea to essentially steal the Enterprise and go there. So, but this is the interesting characteristic about Spock. So happen to be wearing a Spock
Yeah, I
shirt
was gonna
today.
say, talk about
Yeah,
a perfect timing for the t-shirt. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think on my T-shirt it says the phrase "I have been and always shall be your friend." So the the but Spock, to his core, has this immense, unfailing loyalty to his teammates, and his friends and his crew. Because in TOS, he hijacks the Enterprise to go, to bring Captain Pike back to Talos 4, right?
Yeah. So
So
this is a play of that kind of, only it's with Leon in this case.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So it's like,
We know Spock's capable of it.
yeah, yeah. So that I like, because it's like, this is to the core character of like who he is, this unwavering loyalty to his teammates. So I like that kind of, that core archetype description of him. Just like we were talking about Pike, right? Pike is like, hey, I'm always going to try and do the right thing, and then
Yeah.
Spock is like, well, I'm always going to be loyal to my friends, and loyalty this time is like, hey, I'm gonna steal the Enterprise. So, which is great. And I thought so. The way they went about trying to steal the Enterprise, see what you think, because they want to simulate a warp core breach, so that they'll have to leave space dock. But during this simulation of the warp core breach, I think we have an introduction of a very, very funny and wonderful character, after that. I'm trying to remember her name. Her name was
Commander Pelia, I think is how you
Pelia.
pronounce it. Yeah. Carol
Yeah.
Kane's the actress, very famous act. Well, definitely a famous actor. She was Penguin's mom in Gotham. She was the old lady in Princess Bride when she goes, "I'm not a witch, I'm
Yes.
your wife." Yeah. So she's been in a ton of other things as well.
Yes. And so she comes on I love her expression, right? So they simulate they're simulating the warp core breach, and on the lower decks you kind of see all this activity, and she's very, very calm and comes to the bridge and just kind of looking around, and Spock is questioning like, hey, we're gonna have a imminent warp core breach, and she's
Yeah,
like,
essential personnel only and all
yeah.
that.
She's like, oh really? And so that was perfect. She was, oh, you didn't know that I teach I teach a course at the academy on warp core
Yeah.
breaches.
She's
And
like, I've seen this before. Yeah.
yeah, that was some brilliant scene. I thought so funny that back and forth between, Spock and Commander Helia. And I think she's going to stay with the show, right? I think she's going to
Yeah,
volunteer
for
to.
at least this season, what my understanding is they kind of announced it or made it be that she was going to be the new chief engineer
Mhm.
before episode 1 even came out. I think that's kind of how they announced it. So
Yeah,
yeah, so she's going to be a recurring character. I don't know if she'll be in every episode, but she's going to be, you know, throughout the season.
yeah. So fantastic scene with her and the bridge crew, and she's suggesting, hey, why don't you guys simulate a nacelle gas leak, I think is what they did. And
Yeah, basically the equivalent of it. Yeah. Or I
yeah,
can't remember the term for it, but yeah, like you need to vent the nacelles or whatever, make it look more, almost like make it look more real. You know what I mean? Like make it bigger, make this spectacle. You got to make this believable, right? Kind of thing.
yeah. And
Yeah.
Spock's like, I had a
Yeah.
hunch. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So interesting here. This planet that
Hmm.
Leon's on, and for those of you who have listened to our overview of the first episode of Strange New Worlds as well as the whole season, know my love for Leon, and she's my favorite
Hmm.
character in the series. So we get a lot of Leon, so I'm happy about that. But she's on this planet called Kajitar 4, and it's it, obviously I don't think it's a planet that's ever been brought up. It's a new planet to the canon of Star Trek, right? And once again, the beauty of the special effects for this episode on the planet, these scenes, and you see these towering things, and it was really beautiful again. So many great shots of the planet. Um, it's a dilithium mining settlement, and basically this planet is kind of helping to build in and fill in some gaps of what Toss talked about, right? Which was the constant struggle and power play between the Klingons and the Federation during the original series era,
Mm.
right? The Klingons were definitely an enemy during Toss and the movies. And so this kind of helps add another element to that lore of the history between the Klingons and the Federation, right? It's the lithium mining settlement on the Klingon border. It has a production split. So for like 30, I think it's like 30 days, the Federation gets it to mine. Another 30 days, the Klingon Empire gets some kind of power sharing agreement they have. And I think what Uhura dials into when she gets this message, right, over some obscure channel or something like that,
Mhm.
is that the distress signal that she's getting, and she realizes this from Leon, is that something serious has happened, right? That it's something that's incredibly serious to the Federation, and that needs attention right away. Otherwise, I don't think Spock would have just willy-nilly gone, yeah, we're gonna just steal the Enterprise and let's get out of here. So it was serious enough. And Uhura, being the unbelievable comms person that she is able to figure that out and decipher that through this message. So I think that was important. And I think it's also, Spock going to Admiral April, played by a great actor named Adrian Holmes. He's hesitant, right? Because you think about it. Okay, he's up at the top brass of Starfleet. So one of their jobs is to make sure that their people aren't going out and deliberately starting some kind of war. I mean, you think about it, things are very tenuous with the Klingon Empire, right? And they're kind of sort of at peace. They're not really at war right now, but the if something were to offset that or offset some kind of shared agreement like they have with this over this planet, and we all know how important lithium is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the fuel. That could end and start some kind of conflict with the Klingons. That kind of peace, I put it in quotation marks because peace is a relative term,
Yeah.
especially in Star Trek. But it could offset the balance of the relations between the Klingon and the Federation. So I think it's important for us to highlight those things because that's really setting the tone and the story moving forward the rest of the episode. So yeah, I mean, I thought the interplay in the cabin there between Spock and the rest of the main staff, the senior staff was pretty funny. But yeah, Pelia, I think Pelia, I think I say her name.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think
so
so.
we get a new alien species here, Chris, that I don't remember hearing about in any other Star Trek series. When and I know this is mentioned at the end of the episode, but we can kind of talk
Yeah.
about it here since we're talking about Commander Pelia. But we're introduced to a new species as well as a little bit of backstory behind that species here.
A lanthanite.
Yeah.
And you're right. I had never heard of a lanthanite before we saw this episode.
I looked it up in Memory Alpha, and the only thing listed is from this episode. So that tells me that that I was correct. I've never heard this in any other Star Trek.
Hmm. Interesting. And the backstory was interesting too, that we learned, right? Because they had apparently lanthanites have lived on Earth amongst us and are they possess a very, very long lifespan, I think essentially forever, it sounds
Yep.
like that they live.
Almost forever. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, very interesting. She seems to be the one, Commander Pele seems to be the one who is overseeing the inspection of some kind, I guess. Like maybe she's
Mhm.
like the senior person on the inspection team. And yeah, that whole scene basically where she's calling Spock's bluff because Vulcans don't lie, even though we know that's not true. Vulcans have lied, but they don't make a habit of lying, right?
Right.
And so she kind of calls him on the bluff, and then she knows what's going on, and she gets him to kind of confess, and then she wants to kind of help it because we learn that she's just bored. She's been
Yeah.
alive for so long. She wants some excitement in her life, I guess.
Yeah. So that's pretty neat to see.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Now, going to Kajitar 4, I think interesting. Our introduction to this planet is we see Leon and this other Klingon having a Klingon blood wine drinking game, right? Where they're just trying to drink and see who can hold it down the longest. And obviously Leon, who comes from, genetics that are
Yeah.
modified, right? Because of her being a descendant of Khan, um, outlasts the Klingon, right? She kind of drinks him under the table, so to speak. He goes and just upchucks. But uh, before she does, or I'm sorry, after she does the drinking contest, she is arranging a meeting with another female Klingon sits down, and she's arranging a meeting with some contact that is supposed to know about this, what they call the Broken Circle, which is the name
Yeah.
of this episode, which is apparently some group or syndicate of ex-Federation and ex-Klingon soldiers who are trying to, get some money and lithium. They actually want to reignite the war between the Federation and the Empire. So, curious on your thoughts about that scene with Leon and the drinking game with the Klingon.
This learning about Leon in season one and then seeing Leon here and some of these opening scenes, this just solidifies like how ferocious Leon is and what kind of an intimidating uh force that she is. She is, if I think of other characters in science fiction to kind of compare her to, I think of Ripley from Aliens. I think of Sarah Connor from Terminator.
Yeah.
She's just got this ferocious, determined like attitude, and she had tragedy in her past, but now she's just all about being essentially like a warrior.
She's a badass, man. I'm
Yeah,
telling you, she is. Yeah,
and
she really is.
that's her thing. Like she is a warrior, and she is ferocious, and it's cool to see. And it's cool to see her go like these one-on-ones with Klingons, because she's going to go one-on-one with anyone. She's not going to back down. That's why
Yeah,
Pike trusts her so much.
yeah. I think I'm pretty sure they didn't in season one. She became like the head of security, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a million and one reasons why I love this character. And I think with her, she's not one dimensional though.
Mm-hmm.
She has a sensitive, like soft kind of side. She's not just all like, you look at me, I'm this big rough and tough person.
Yeah.
She has a soft side. That's why at the end of season one, she runs off, right, to go try and find Oriana, who was rescued during that Gorn, that when they fought the Gorn, right?
Yeah.
And try to reunite her with her parents. So I think from her history with the Gorn as a child and everything, I think there's certainly that side. So she has an empathetic side to her, right? She's not just all, smoke screen and everything like that. So I think that's great that she's not just some one-dimensional character, because
Yeah.
there's enough one-dimensional characters in TV these days. We don't need that. But there's so much goodness here. And so I definitely, you can tell when Leon recognizes Dr. Mbenga,
Mm-hmm.
you
They
can
have
see
that
kind of
moment.
kind of sigh of a relief, right? That okay, my message got to them. And then things start to happen, right? On Kajatar 4.
Yeah, they have their meeting with the gang, and you see, they're talking, they're trying to figure out what's going on, and Leon has arranged the meeting so that she can sell Federation tech to the Klingon buyers, and they're trying to figure out, what's all behind that. And it does make sense when they figure out, hey, who's involved with this broken circle. And yeah, it's both the Klingons and the Federation, and they want to rekindle the war essentially to be able to make more money. So that totally makes sense. But you see Leon go and do the sale, do that transaction with the Klingons, and that is cool because we get to see more of Leon's kind of ferociousness and her warrior spirit there. Or I think she says something like, "Hey, I've got some sort of detonator here,"
And it's
and
not even a real thing.
it's not
She
a
just
real
makes it
thing. She's
up. Yeah.
bluffing the guy, right?
Yeah, she's like, if you don't want to lose your entire lower
Yeah,
half, I suggest you stop. And then afterwards, they're like, what does that mean or whatever? She's like, I have no idea. Like she just makes it up on the spot. Like she's really good at improvising in these. That's one thing I love about her is that she seems very to keep a very level, cool head under pressure, under
Mhm.
immense pressure.
Yeah, yeah, that is great. I like what, and I did you like what the Klingon said to her? He said something like, "Are you sure you don't have Klingon blood?"
Yeah,
So that was cool.
yeah,
You kind of
yeah.
recognize, you know,
She's one tough, tough character. Really,
yeah,
really tough.
yeah, they
Yeah.
recognize that.
The more I get of Leon, the more I want. Like it's just that's just the way it's been really since the very beginning. And
Yeah,
hats off to Christina Chong who plays her because she's absolutely fantastic.
yeah, yeah, that's cool. That was cool. Um, so they're splitting up, and then we have Mbenga, Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel. They're going to give some medical aid to some people that need it there. And I'm really happy that there was as much Nurse Chapel in the episode. I think that was fantastic.
Yeah, I
Fantastic.
bet you were happy about that, weren't
Yes,
you?
yeah. Yes, I thought it was wonderful. And Mbega too. And oh wait, we talked about this earlier too, but Captain Pike is not in the most of this episode. So
Yeah.
he gives freedom for all of this exploration of the other characters, which is
In fact, I think he was only in that very beginning, then he
yeah,
leaves, and that's it. We don't get any more of him.
yeah.
So
So fantastic opportunity to see more of these characters. So we see Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga, helping the people, being able to render medical aid, doing what they do best, helping those in need. And a little bit later, some Klingon baddies come in to say, "Hey, what are you doing? And we need your help too." And so that's where it gets kind of interesting because you see a lot of this was new for me. You see a lot of history, or we become aware that there is a lot of history that both Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel have with the Klingons
yeah.
and the Klingon War, and it kind of plays out. We see this in their emotions and how they're talking with each other, right there. So those those Klingon baddies, they pretty much take Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel. I guess we could say essentially hostage, right? They take them and they take them away.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much. I mean, and they were already busy, right? I mean, here they
mhm.
are trying to help out, Oriana's parents and the other people are suffering from ion radiation sickness due to the exposure of some photonic weaponry. So they're pretty sick,
Yeah,
right? They're pretty sick. This kind of stuff, they made it seem like this kind of this thing is affecting them, kind of all the way down to their bones almost, right? Like their DNA.
yeah,
And they need this medical help. So this is they're not just, oh, I'm sick. They're legitimately, they're gonna die basically if they don't get some kind of help.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. So Mbenga and Nurse Chapel. So they're taken when they're taken. This is where it actually starts to get a little bit fuzzy for me because they're taking in. It seems like they're being brought in this big cave, and within that cave, there's like a big Federation. Well, not big, but there's like a Federation ship in there, and they're wondering, hey, what is that like essentially doing here? Um, and I don't know how the Broken Circle organization got that ship there. Maybe they explained it in the episode. I
I thought
totally
they said
missed
that they
it.
built it
Yeah, I didn't get that.
with tech. That's what I thought I remember them saying.
Yeah.
You know, we have these moments sometimes, guys. It's okay. It happens. You get older, you have moments. It's,
No.
it's fine. So, for those of you who are watching or listening, if you remember how they explain how that got there, please let us know in the comments below if you're on YouTube, or send us a message or an email, or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook and let us know.
Yeah, that'd be good. Because I remember them saying that. Yeah, they built it. And I was like, they built it? Anyways.
The difference, though, Chris, is they didn't build this city on rock and roll. I just want to put that out there. Those of you who are fans of 80s music,
There you
the
go.
ship was not built on rock and roll. Maybe on a little rock, but no roll. So sorry, that
Yeah.
was a super
No,
corny joke, but I had to say it.
that was an awesome joke.
It popped into my head.
So they
Everybody
get
watching this is shaking their heads,
yeah.
going, "Oh my gosh, is this over yet?"
No, no, it's all gonna get better. It can only we'll just keep getting better. So now they're in the ship, I believe, and they're trying to figure out what to do now. They know they've got to do something,
Yeah.
and so a little soon after they Mbenga and Nurse Chapel, they're like, okay, are we gonna do this again? We gonna do this again? And they have that. I guess it's like a super serum that they
Yeah, it's like
inject
some green
themselves.
liquid they have in a vial, but it didn't do what I thought it was gonna. I thought it was something they were gonna use for treatment.
Yeah,
And then they inject themselves. And I'm like, well, wait a second. What was that for?
it
What?
kind of sprung up sudden to me, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
really quickly.
yeah. So they did that, and they started beating up all of the Klingons.
Yeah.
So they
We talked
became,
about
yeah,
we
yeah,
talked about this, Chris. I'm guessing by the way they kind of were hush hush about it, guessing that liquid that they took to make themselves like kind of superhuman strength there for a little while. I'm guessing that is probably illegal within the Federation. Maybe it's not,
yeah,
but something like that where you give yourself extra strength doesn't doesn't seem to me like it would be legal.
yeah. I agree. But while we're talking about that, because um,
What
this
I
isn't,
could see real quick, sorry. What
yeah,
I could see though is take what they're about to do, put in the theme music, and you could turn it into a Mentos commercial
oh,
where they just go beat up. They pop a Mentos and they beat the Klingons up and they go
yeah,
Mentos, the fresh maker. And
yeah.
maybe it's more legal way, but anyways, sorry.
They
I don't know
told,
why this stuff's popping in my head at 11 o'clock at night, but it is.
oh, it's all good. We'll call it the Mentos Super Soldier Serum.
There you go. There you go.
Right?
That's right. Okay, we got to stamp that and send that into Mentos so we can get some royalties.
Yeah, but yeah, they essentially like are superhuman for a little while, and they're able to beat up all the Klingons. It's got to have some bad after effects. I mean,
That's what I'm
have it do
thinking.
have that
Yeah.
do to you. Yeah. Um. So in I'm sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, but this kind of this super serum that they're taking, there's actually something similar in the Expanse. in the book of, in the book, a character in the Expanse has um some chemicals that she can release like into her body that has the same effect that happened with Nurse Chapel and Mbenga. So I thought
Hmm.
that was kind of interesting to see. So they totally beat up all of these Klingons, and it was
Yeah.
cool. It's a um, cool battle scenes and cool hand to hand combat scenes. I think, um, and I totally would not have expected it. And maybe that's what makes it appealing is because this is Nurse Chapel and Doctor Mbenga that are in this essentially hand to hand fighting scenes with these Klingons and beating them up. So the maybe they just weren't very strong Klingons.
Well, I mean, think about that, right? I mean, is every Klingon some massively great warrior? No.
Yeah,
Most Klingons have pretty good strength, right? Typically more than a human. If these Klingons were super weak, they might not have needed the serum, but they obviously needed enough in order to get through the battle of fighting these Klingons.
yeah, yeah. And Benga, I think, is the one that comes up with the good idea to find the transponder and kind of code a message in the transponder because they realize it's going to be, hey, this ship is they're going to launch this ship and it's going to pretend like it's going to attack that other Klingon ship that's come into orbit and start and reignite like the war. So Mbenga is
Yeah,
pretty
that's what they
smart.
want. The Broken
Yeah,
Circle wants that, right?
yeah, yeah. So Mbenga is pretty smart to reprogram the transponder there. But they get trapped in that airlock area, I believe, and the ship eventually like takes off, and so that's where we see Nurse Chapel and Mbenga searching for some EV suits in the lockers on what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and so yeah, this Klingon ship arrives, this battle cruiser arrives in orbit. and we find the Enterprise hiding amongst the you know red, like the if they're not asteroids, they're like they look like red, big giant red crystals.
Yeah.
They say like something to the effect, Ortega says something to the effect of uh like space, not space junk, but they look like space junk on the radar, but something on it. I think it's like the rings of the planet, maybe, or something like, I don't remember specifically, but they're
Yeah.
hiding in there, trying to, keep themselves hidden from the Klingon ship when it arrives in. And yeah, this ship comes up into orbit, and it's identified as a crossfield class, which I believe is the same class as the Discovery, I think, even though it was shaped
It
differently.
is. Yeah. I
I want
have
to
it.
say it,
Yeah. I'll
something like
look that
that.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like that. So at least the whole arrangement is. And it enters orbit. And so Spock's listening to this emergency message that Dr. Mbenga sends, which I think was a good point, Chris. Dr. Mbenga is really smart for doing that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're just going to see a Federation ship flap. They're not going to fire on that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so he deduces, or he comes to the conclusion that this ship is definitely what he calls a false flag,
Yeah.
but is very hesitant to destroy it because thinking through the message and everything, he realizes that, yeah, Dr. Mbenga and Lieutenant or Nurse Chapel are probably over on that ship. And we know that he's developed feelings for Nurse Chapel because they did kiss in season 1, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the yeah, I thought that the view and the scene of Lieutenant Ortega's flying the ship all over the place through that you know whatever that stuff was, ice junk, I don't know, whatever it was pretty good. And the Klingon ships were gonna line up and fire on this Federation ship, and then Spock gives the order to fire on it and destroy it. Which, did you catch that close up of Spock's face where he fires and you can just see the grimace on his face because he thinks he's killing Chapel
Yeah.
and Dr. Mbenga?
Yeah. And the tension in his voice,
Yeah.
which was played really good, right? He's kind of a this devastating decision that he has to make.
Yeah.
And and he does make the decision. He gives the order, which is the
Logical thing to
difficult,
do.
logical thing to do, and
Yeah.
the very difficult thing to do, but what had to be done at the moment in order to stop the war.
Yeah. Imagine being in that situation, Chris, like in Spock's situation where you're half human, half Vulcan, and you have this kind of battle raging inside of you, right? The logical Vulcan, emotionless side, and then you're the human side, and how that would, if you haven't undergone the Kolinar, and even when you have like just the sheer nature of the idea of battling back and forth, right? I think you can even think that just to our lives as humans, right? Where we have uh people talk about having their demons inside of them or the things they struggle with, and that inner battle, you're right, that you're fighting off one side of you, maybe a side of your personality or a habit or something like that inside of you. And so I kind of relate that to Spock and the battle that he's going through as he's trying to learn to live with these human emotions as well as his Vulcan side.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, because let's say he was just full Vulcan, and then right then I don't want to use the word like easy for a full Vulcan to make that decision, but the full Vulcan that is just completely logical, where all of the emotions are completely suppressed, right? That full Vulcan would know, okay, what's the logical thing to do? Logical thing would be, we have to stop the war, because if there's a war, all of these people are going to die, and then that's just kind of the immediate decision that the Vulcan would do, and probably not even display very much emotion, like per se. But for Spock, like you said, for Spock to go into that situation, is he understands the implicit logic of the situation and the decision he has to do, but he has to do that, um, at the same time of dealing That's my dog. If you heard that, he has to do that at the same time with these emotions that are within him, which is so hard to do. Right? But it's the human. I guess it's the human thing to do. But what it also does is it highlights his ability as a commander, and in that situation. So because he he's dealing with those consequences of his emotions and making that decision. So that Spock certainly in this episode he didn't expect that he was going to be making these kinds of decisions, but he did. He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he kind of put himself in that situation by his choice, his idea of hijacking the Enterprise, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So okay. So they fire on the ship. The ship blows up before the Klingon ship does. So obviously there's this kind of act that says, hey, the Federation ship's firing on a Federation ship. That's not right. And we find that prior to, or I'm sorry, this is after the ship's destroyed. Spock has a discussion with the Klingon captain and says, "Hey, this was a rogue Federation ship, blah blah." He doesn't really believe Spock, and so he says, "Well, let's go drink some blood wine together and talk
Yeah.
in person." And then we get towards the end of the episode for there. But this scene of Doctor Mbenga and Nurse Chapel going out an airlock with no EV suit on and living.
Yeah.
I don't remember the specific science behind it, like how quickly you would die if you're exposed to the vacuum of space. I don't feel like this was super accurate. Like I would say this is probably maybe my biggest nitpick of the whole episode
Yeah.
is that scene. Like cinematically, okay, oh, it's kind of cool. They jump into space, they get beamed out, within a matter of a few minutes or however long it is, and they survive. But I don't know that that's super accurate. My understanding's always been, if you're in a spacesuit and you take off your helmet, it's gonna like that because space is so cold and there's no air and all those kinds of things and you're all that stuff. I don't know if it's
Mhm.
very accurate the way they did it. I mean, they did it to continue the plot, right? That they get off the ship without dying when it's
Mhm.
blown up, and to bring some emotion to Spock and further the emotion between him and Chapel. But I don't think I was a fan of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're meaning. It's a very so my understanding is there's a very very short duration of survival, right? Because you go in, you're going into a vacuum, so there's no pressure, so that vacuum is going to do all sorts of things to the fluids in your body, and
Yeah,
kind
like
of
boil and stuff too. I think,
yeah,
right?
well,
Yeah,
yep, yeah, absolutely, and then the cold, perhaps it's absolute zero at that point. So there's a very 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 like short duration that you can be exposed to that vacuum environment of space and
and radiation too, right?
radiation.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're near a star. There's gonna be radiation out there yeah,
Yeah, I think you have to exhale at the same time. Anyway,
yeah.
I know they've done it in other episodes of Star Trek. I think maybe Enterprise. There was trying to remember if it was Enterprise where Archer or it was Enterprise or Deep Space Nine where someone it was a very 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 short duration, but they had to go into the vacuum of space and they survived. But I think it was done more realistically in those previous Star Trek
Hmm.
episodes. I felt like, and I know they were there out short, but I just felt like it kind of seemed like a long time for Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel to be out in in the vacuum.
Yeah, I didn't find it super
Yeah,
believable to be honest with you. Like, not that I want either character to die, but I think it'd be more believable if one of them died.
yeah,
I don't want that to happen, but we know they don't die, right? So between the two of them, obviously in sick bay, Nurse Chapel's the more hurt one,
hmm,
which kind of makes sense in as far as the plot goes, because then Spock's going to come down there. But it does give us an opportunity to see Spock in a very worried emotional state before she
yeah,
wakes up, right? I'm curious because Nurse Chapel's your girl here in the show, right? So I'm curious on this, Chris. What was your thought of that scene with Spock standing by her bedside, and you could tell he was getting emotional before Dr. Mbenga started talking to him? I'm curious how that what resonated with you. What were your thoughts about that scene between him and Chapel?
I really, really liked it. So uh, Spock, uh, so Nurse Chapel and Spock, they both have these really, really strong feelings for each other. But Spock is still coming to terms with understanding of what those feelings mean.
Especially because he's engaged, right?
Right.
Like the
Especially,
Pring.
yeah. So he's got all of this like confusion, like I'm sure. But coming down there and being in sick bay with Nurse Chapel, and then the expression in his eyes, and him literally saying something like I don't, he doesn't have words on what he's feeling at the moment.
Yeah.
Spock is capable of his what I like about this idea of you know Spock as a character, but also of people and of certain types of men, and the idea of I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but the idea of stoicism too. It's Spock, he feels like he always wants to be in control of his emotions and in control of the situation, and wants to sometimes have a persona like, hey, he's not bothered by um, a lot of emotions, or he doesn't feel, but he feels very, very, very deeply. And you see that, I think, in that scene with him in Nurse Chapel, just in those few moments, and you see that in his expression, like on his face. So I really liked it. I thought, on one sense, is very romantic in a sense, and then it uh, was also very sensitive for Spock, and then it was illuminating for him to kind of realize that, hey, I've got, he doesn't know how to he doesn't even know how to explain like what he's feeling, but there's a lot there on how he
Yeah.
feels about Nurse Chapel. So it's
Yeah.
probably one of my actually my probably one of my favorite scenes of the maybe that is the favorite scene for me on this particular episode, is just was that moment there.
Yeah, and then she kind of wakes up, right? And what was the dialogue exchange between them? Like she says something to him, kind of like, like Nurse Chapel, kind of sarcastic or whatever, and then he responds. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was a good scene. It, I found it interesting too, right? As we move along, and the scene between Spock and the Klingon captain, he's so unimpressed, right, with
Yeah,
with his explanation. He's like, "Well, sir, I'm a Vulcan, we don't lie or whatever," and he's like, "Ah, yeah, right." And it's just he's just not impressed by the fact that he's a Klingon but he's a Vulcan and so forth. And so I think it was Spock's idea to beam down and discuss further in person over blood wine or whatever. And yeah, but Spock proves himself, right? At the end of this episode, he proves himself that over this barrel, and they have this Spock kind of mends the fences,
mhm.
right? He goes to the water cooler, so to speak, and mends the fences with the Klingons to know everything's okay and they're having a good time and all that. But it's very interesting. So the episode's getting ready to end, and so Spock calls up Admiral April, patches things over with him too, right? Admiral April realizes what Spock did, right, and the importance of it, and so he decides not to punish him, but he said, "Don't ever do this again, or the next time it'll be your commission."
Yeah,
That's pretty serious, right? That's a pretty serious thing. We all know when Spock's older that he will steal the Enterprise
yeah,
again,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
To take Captain Pike home, or not take him to home, take him to Talos, right?
Yeah.
Talos four, is it Talos 4, Talos
Talos
5?
4. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's interesting. What I do find interesting though, and I'm sure you caught this, Chris, at the very end when Admiral April is looking at that screen pop up and they see a vessel right on the
Yeah.
screen, and it's a Gorn vessel,
Yeah.
and so obviously a threat of re-engaging a Klingon war for the Federation is no bueno, as you would say, right? But I think the serious threat here in this case, the serious threat that they have to be thinking about, and I'm sure Admiral April's thinking about as well, is the Gorn, right? In season one, we had attacks by the Gorn on the Enterprise. We've had we've dealt with the Gorn on a couple of occasions, right? And we know that the Gorn are definitely an enemy. I mean, we only saw them in one episode, I believe, in TOS, right? It was just that one, the arena,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
we meet the Gorn. That's the only time I think the Gorn's in TOS. I don't. In fact, I don't think we see him in Star Trek ever again until now.
I don't I don't think we see them. They may be, maybe they're mentioned in dialogue, but that'd be very rare,
Yeah, yeah,
that they were.
yeah. So we and we talked about this during our review of season one, right? That the Gorn seem to be coming a recurring villain. Just as Klingons have been recurring villains, Romulans, the Borg, all these different, Dominion, always different, recurring bad guys. The Gorn are clearly going to be an antagonist throughout the run of Strange New Worlds, which I think is cool because now we're getting so much more backstory into this species, and they've become very like Alien versus Predator esque, right?
Yeah.
Remember in that episode we loved so much, that kind of horror crossover episode they did. So I thought this was a pretty good first episode,
Yeah.
pretty good season premiere. What about you?
I thought it was pretty good, and of course having, the highlights with Nurse Chapel and the other characters and Doctor Mbenga.
And
I love
Leon.
that, and Leon. Yes, episode was made for us. It was good.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think you made a good point. Like Captain Pike wasn't in it, so there was a lot more room to do some more other character exploration.
Yeah.
Right? We got a new species introduced to us in this episode. That kind of shines on who Commander Pelia is, right? The Lanthanites.
Mm-hmm.
We got a new planet, right? In what was the name of the planet again?
Kajitar.
Kajitar 4.
Yeah.
So we got some new species, new planets. Like this is a classic, Planet of the Week original series type Star Trek episode, right? Where
Yeah.
we have a crisis, we have something going on, we have a battle, we have a climax, we have new planet, new species, like all these types of things wrapped into one. They really packed a lot, I think, in this first episode. And what I think is great though is that while Strange New Worlds is definitely more episodic, right? Just like TOS and TNG, and some of their series too. But I think we're going to start to see a little bit of a recurring story arc here, right? With the Gorn. I think that's going to be kind of a in and out story arc, and I'm curious to see how they intertwine that the rest of the season, and then through future seasons of Strange New Worlds.
Yeah. And I think the Gorn are a perfect up. It's a super opportunity. I think it's a golden opportunity. Like, we know nothing about the Gorn,
And they're
so
menacing looking in the
yeah.
show. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a golden opportunity.
Yeah, it really is. And so uh as we wrap up our review and recap here of Star Trek Strange New World season 2 episode 1, The Broken Circle, give me just some final thoughts, Chris, on this episode. What stood out to you the most, or do you have anything else we haven't talked about that you might be nitpicky or gripe about? And now that we have the first episode of season 2, what are some things that maybe you're thinking about, or maybe some expectations you might have going forward the rest of the season?
Yeah. So some highlights that I like strong highlights. As I said before, the blossoming kind of, maybe we could call it potential romantic relationship between Nurse Chapel and Spock, and all of the complications that could ensue there. I think would be super. to explore. Really liked it, and I hope they develop it more because they teased it a little bit in the original series, right? And here in Strange New Worlds, it's different, and I hope they can explore it more. And I hope there's a good future actually for Nurse Chapel and for Spock. The other part I really liked was Commander Pelia, if I get her name, I think that's correct. The Lanthanite. I thought she was super super funny, and I loved her exchange, and I loved her dialogue, and I loved the way she talked. And it's gonna be, if she continues on the rest of these episodes in season two, it is gonna be marvelous because I think she's gonna just offer this great humor to it, and we're gonna learn about the Lanthanites, and there's this whole other big opportunity to see what other Lanthanites may have been on Earth that we may not be aware of. Um, the other highlight is, I said a great opportunity for the Gorn, and they can totally explore that. And so I anticipate that, hey, maybe in this season we're gonna learn more about the Gorn, and then there's that Broken Circle kind of organization that they've got to explore too. And then what I would like to see different, um, and I think we're spoiled because we came out of Picard, but talked about this a little bit earlier was, um, and this is just my personal taste, but it would be nice that for me in Star Trek, uh, when there's things happening and we're in space and all of that's happening in space, whether it's a space battle or just them exploring a new planet or exploring a new environment, just getting the sense that, hey, this might be closer. When I watch it on screen, this is maybe closer to reality on what could potentially be, rather than it's just like so far like removed from reality when we're seeing the behavior of certain space spaceships and action and battles. I'm not asking for like totally understand where it has to be entertaining and great to watch, but I just feel like, it'd be nice to have maybe a little bit more closer to reality. And for me personally, when I'm watching the screen, or I'm watching a scene, I like to like enjoy maybe slower shots of that of the ships, or the kind of the beauty that they've created there. I don't need a lot of fast cuts or visual notions, as you know about
You
me.
don't need some Michael Bay
Yeah,
explosions.
yeah. I like to just appreciate what's there. And as you know, I don't like the shaky cam at all. So
Yeah.
so those are kind of my thoughts. Strong first episode to begin with for me. But for you, like, what were your highlights and strong points and likes, and maybe nitpicks if you've got there, and expectations for the season?
Yeah, I would say highlights, Leon. So I'm not blushing, am I? Anyways, no, I think yeah, I think it was great to see some exploration of other characters, right? We got a little bit more backstory. Did you notice during that kind of whole scene with Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel and the Klingon fighting, and they were having to do all that stuff in the airlock?
Mhm.
It's very obvious that they have had some type of dealings with Klingons before, as far as in battle or in a war or whatever, right? There's some level of PTSD, I think, with Dr. Mbenga especially. I think you
Yeah,
kind of saw that in his eyes. I know we didn't really touch on that, but I kind of noticed that. I don't know if that stood out to you, but
yeah, yeah. You're right. It did to me because there was like some phrases that she said. Nurse Chapel said, "Hey, do you really want to do this again?"
yeah.
And he said, "No," but he said something, "No, but I think we have to." And then she said a phrase like, "Hey, I served during the war, wherever on whatever place she served, but she said she
Yeah.
served during the war, and then he served too, right? He talked for a
Yeah,
while,
he
like,
was very
yeah,
descriptive about like so much blood in the air that it was raining blood and all
yeah,
this, and like some very descriptive, bloody, gory Klingon battle. So there's a history there, and I'm curious to see where that goes. Like, do we hear more about that, right? So I kind of have an expectation when it
yeah,
comes to that. Like, do we get to hear more about Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel's past, right? When it comes to being a part of conflicts or whatever. But yeah, I love anytime we get more Leon, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But I thought that I thought it was cool, like having her off world, quote unquote, or off world from Earth or off ship, kind of being like some espionage, right? Trying to
Yeah.
learn what's going on. She's still on duty, even though she's not. But overall, the CGI, the beautiful shots of Cajitar 4 and of the Enterprise at Space Station 1 around Jupiter. I mean, just some beautiful visuals in this first episode. Absolutely stunning. Some nitpicks. Okay, the Broken Circle. So we have an organization called Broken Circle,
Hmm.
made up of ex Klingon or ex Federation and Klingons trying to start this war or whatever. Uh, I don't know, that to me eerily similar to the group called the Circle that were made up of Bajorans that were all about Bajor for Bajorans. If you remember, it
Yeah.
was like a two-part episode that started, I think it was season 3, about this kind of extremist group of Bajorans who didn't want other people on their world. They wanted just Bajor for Bajorans. So I kind of had that kind of tied me back to that a little bit because you're kind of thinking of an extremist group and they're trying to instigate and start something that you know they don't really need to, and so that kind of was like, I kind of felt like maybe there's a little copycat there a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but nitpicky wise, it's just more of, I think you made a good point with the space stuff, right? Like trying to add a little more realism in there. I know we talked about the reboot BSG. I think had some of the best examples of what it would kind of be like to fly through space, right? Where a ship's flying and it turns and it's as its momentum is turning, it's maybe doing something else because it's not just a turn and stop
Hmm.
like you always see in all these different sci-fi shows and movies.
Yeah.
There's and Star Trek always has these science advisors, so maybe it's just a combo, like you said, Chris, of being
Yeah.
entertaining while providing some sort of realism scientifically. But yeah, so expectations for me. I really want to see more of how this relationship between Spock and Nurse Chapel develops. Like,
Hmm.
is it going to be like corny and hokey, or is it going to be real? Like they made it some deep emotions, I feel like, in this episode between those two. So I think that was good. I've said it since season 1 when they announced that Leon was a descendant of Khan. I
Yeah.
really want to see how, like, where did that come in? Like, how did she become a descendant of Khan? Like, where does that tie into and her history there? In her history there, because uh Captain Kirk has not taken on command of the Enterprise, which means Captain Kirk and the Enterprise have not found the USS Botany Bay, which Kirk is on, or which I mean, Khan is
Con is
on,
on. Yeah.
in that sleeper ship, right, as their punishment. So Leon is tied to him, but yet they have not found him yet. So that's interesting. Are they going to mix it up where they actually have Pike and the Enterprise find Khan, and they have somebody else playing him, and now you've got Leon face to face with her, you know, that could be,
Hmm.
I mean, that would really screw with the TOS timeline and not having Kirk find him. I don't think they should do that, by the way, because Kirk and Khan, that's kind of a big time,
Yeah.
foe, and that would then completely mess up Wrath of Khan. So I don't want them to do that, but I'm just saying, like, how does everything tie in, right? I really want to know how they're going to tie her backstory of being related to Khan into the whole thing. I'm really curious to see how they're able to get Una out of her situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And is she going to serve time, or are they going to bring her, like, that whole situation? I will. Okay, one more thing, and then I'll stop. So the Commander Pelia, I'm unsure on her yet.
Hmm.
I think she was funny, but maybe like not quite exactly like what you think of a Starfleet officer. I'm a little uncertain. I love the actress. Carol Kane's phenomenal. She's a fantastic actress. I'm kind of unsure of the character so far. Maybe part of it is that I miss Hemmer, and I wish we still had Hemmer
Hmm.
because we loved him. We did. We really did. We loved
Yeah.
Hemmer, and of course, talking with Bruce was fantastic. Um, but I'm unsure of that character so far. We'll see. More to come. Obviously, I'm not saying I don't like the character or I do. I got to get more to kind of get a feel and kind of make a decision on whether or not I like the character or not.
I can totally actually I now that you said that I totally understand it because is it too much? Is that
Yeah,
person is it too much like that?
yeah. Because if it's gonna be like how she
Yeah.
was in this first episode, if that's how it's gonna be the whole time, it might get a little bit old.
Yeah.
And again, that's nothing against Carol Kane because they're giving her direction on how to act and what things to do and stuff and how to portray the character. But yeah, I think I need more time with the
Get it.
character before I make my decision.
I get it. Like to use an analogy, that's like how I felt about Tilly on Discovery, right? I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
well, how did you get on? How did you get on to be serving on a starship? Yeah,
yeah,
got it.
yeah. I will say though, I'll give Tilly some credit. There are moments I've seen in some of the episodes of Discovery where she pulls a rabbit out of a hat, and I think at times you're like, how'd she get in the ship? And other times you're like, wow, you are actually pretty smart. You just kind of you don't always show it. Um, so yeah, I need more time with Commander Pelia before I make my choice. So
Yeah,
but yeah, this was great. We love doing these deep dives. We hope you love doing these deep dives. If this is your first time watching us or listening to the Random Redshirt podcast, please go on to Instagram and Facebook, like us and follow us there on those social media platforms. If you're listening to us, head over to YouTube and follow us or subscribe to us on YouTube, so that you can get all of the latest content. You can watch the video versions. If this is the first video of ours that you've watched, also be sure to hit the subscribe and the bell for notifications so you can get the next latest and greatest episodes. And we have some fantastic episodes coming out. If you have not gotten a chance to watch our interview with Ron B. Moore, the 5-time Emmy-winning visual effects artist from Star Trek, be sure to go back and watch that. It's out now. And Chris, we have another guest coming up next week that I am more excited about than anybody we've had. And that's not a slight against who we've had on so far, but my dear friend, Natalia Nugalich, who played Admiral Nechayev on Star Trek The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. She's been in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation and a million other things, to include movies with Jack Nicholson and so forth. She's going to be on with us. It's not something she normally does, but I am so absolutely thrilled to have her on. I cannot wait to talk with her. It's going to be so great.
yeah, that's going to be incredible. She is the admiral that was able to put Picard in his place every time.
And Cisco too, a little bit. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, she was not one to be reckoned with. But I love Natalia to death. She's a dear friend, and I really look forward to sharing time with her and getting a chance for her to share her career and her life with you guys. I think you're gonna love her as much as I do. So she's just absolutely wonderful woman.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you so much for watching. As always, we do appreciate you all over the globes and the interwebs who follow us and watch us here. And we can't wait to share more Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We plan on our episode reviews coming out usually every Sundays, but they might be off and on a day, depending if we have a guest interview with us. So be sure to stay tuned every week for our weekly reviews of season 2 of Strange New Worlds. And with that being said, Chris, that's all we got, and we look forward to the next one.
Outstanding. Take care.
Yep. All right. Take care, everybody, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.